September 11, 2001 marked the worst attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. On that day, two hijacked commercial airliners struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. Moments later, a third hijacked plane hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And a fourth hijacked plane, apparently aimed at another Washington target, crashed in a field in Pennsylvania.
It was more than you could take in. I mean, it was just total destruction, like as far as you could see.
More than 3,000 people lost their lives in the disaster. As Americans struggled to come to terms with the magnitude of the attacks over the following weeks and months, President George W. Bush announced a war on terrorism. His administration worked on plans to make the United States more secure by finding and punishing the terrorists responsible for the attacks.
I want justice. There's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said, "Wanted, dead or alive."
Nobody claimed responsibility for the attacks, but it was quickly determined that Osama bin Laden and his al-Qaeda terrorist network were behind them. Bin Laden had been planning the attack for years from his stronghold in the mountains of Afghanistan. Bin Laden's hatred of the United States stemmed from several causes. He objected that American troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia, home to the most sacred sites of Islam. He was angered by what he saw as American support of Israel in its dispute with the Palestinians, who are also Muslim. Finally, Islamic extremists, like bin Laden, believe that globalization has led to the westernization of their culture. Islamic extremists first targeted the United States in 1993. In February of that year, a bomb exploded in the underground garage of one of the Twin Towers. Only 5 people died, but the attack was an ominous foreshadowing of 9/11. Meanwhile, Osama bin Laden built up the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Bin Laden was bent on ending American involvement in the Middle East. On August 7, 1998, Al-Qaeda set off car bombs at the U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The blasts killed 225 people and injured more than 5,000 others. And in 2000, 17 American sailors were killed when Al-Qaeda suicide bombers exploded a bomb near the USS Cole, an American warship harbored in Yemen. But the September 11th attacks were the most extensive and the most shocking. Terrorism prevention became a priority. Osama bin Laden quickly became a focus in the war on terrorism. He was hiding in Afghanistan. There, a group of Islamic fundamentalists called the Taliban led the government and had allowed al-Qaeda to run training camps for terrorists. President Bush demanded that the Taliban turn over bin Laden and shut down the training camps. When the Taliban refused, the United States, joined by Great Britain and other allies, sent in forces. Troops entered Afghanistan with 2 missions. One was to destroy the al-Qaeda fighters hiding there. The other was to remove the Taliban government from power. The American troops, joined by Afghan rebels opposed to the Taliban, succeeded in bringing down the regime within 3 months, and al-Qaeda was driven from its sanctuary. American troops killed or captured several al-Qaeda leaders, but the most wanted terrorist, bin Laden himself, was still on the loose.
He thinks he can run and he thinks he can hide, but he's not going to be able to, so we'll get him. May happen tomorrow, may happen a month, may happen a year from now, but we'll get him.
Still, bin Laden and al-Qaeda remained active.
If you look at the picture, since 9/11, we have seen more attacks in more parts of the world than ever before.
And bin Laden continued to issue video and audio-taped messages threatening Western countries and taunting those who had been unable to capture him. The United States has also taken steps to fight terrorism at home. Soon after September 11th, Bush called for the creation of a new cabinet-level Department of Homeland Security to coordinate domestic security. Congress passed the Patriot Act, which gave law enforcement officials broader power to monitor suspected terrorists and detain or deport people associated with terrorist groups. Critics said that the Patriot Act violated civil liberties, but supporters answered that the broader powers were vital to the effort to make Americans secure. Next, Bush turned his attention to Iraq. In 2001, the United States accused that country's dictator Saddam Hussein of stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. The Security Council of the United Nations ordered Iraq to allow inspectors to search for these weapons. The inspectors found nothing, though Iraq's government often blocked their efforts. On March 19, 2003, American and British military forces invaded Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Some argued that weapons inspectors should have been allowed to continue their search, but President Bush and others insisted that it was time to remove Saddam from power. Saddam's forces collapsed quickly, and as the Iraqi capital Baghdad fell, Saddam and other Iraqi leaders went into hiding. In December of 2003, Saddam was captured by American forces.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Despite Saddam's downfall, fighting in Iraq intensified. Terrorists joined the fight, attacking American soldiers, Iraqi security forces, and innocent Iraqi civilians. Critics warned that the United States had entered a quagmire in Iraq, and that the war there undermined efforts to fight terrorism.
Once the administration decided to go after Saddam, key military and intelligence assets were then moved to focus on the hunt for Saddam and building the capability to invade Iraq. As a result, the effort that we had focused on bin Laden and his followers certainly suffered.
In his State of the Union address of 2004, President Bush attempted to reassure the nation that progress was being made in the war on terror.
We're tracking Al-Qaeda around the world, and nearly 2/3 of their known leaders have now been captured or killed.
Many of these terrorists, including some of the masterminds of 9/11, have been captured. Hundreds of al-Qaeda foot soldiers are being held at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Despite these successes, some say the danger of terrorism has spread.
One can think of al-Qaeda as a hornet's nest, and we stuck our hand in that nest, and they became active, angry, and left the nest.
We've made it harder to communicate, harder to operate, but they still have command and control because we still see terrorist attacks every several weeks on a big level somewhere in the world.
Aware that danger still exists, armed forces overseas and security forces at home continue to protect Americans by seeking out terrorists and increasing security measures.